let's talk about how I went to prison and how I got a pardon that got me out 10 years early. So in 2002, just after my 18th birthday, I committed two separate crimes. I was with a group of people and we committed a robbery and separately a non-fatal shooting. There was no justification. I was absolutely guilty. I was absolutely in the wrong. So I pleaded guilty to the crimes that I committed, and on the day of sentencing, my guidelines were from 8 to 13 years. My lawyer said, look, it's going to be tough. You're going to get 10 years, but you're going to get through this. They then modified the guidelines to 10 to 16 years. And he said, look, you're still going to get through this. They're probably going to give you the low end because they saw the old guidelines. The judge sentenced me to 32 years, which was twice the high point of the guidelines. So I was lost. I felt hopeless, and if it hadn't been for the people around me, I would have gone down that path. I had people who loved me and supported me and believed in me and encouraged me. They wanted me to be my best self. Remember when I got to Nottoway, there was another guy who'd gotten about the same amount of time and was about the same age. Whereas everybody was telling me I needed to go to college and look toward the future, everybody was telling him, yo bro, you got 30 years, you got to make an example of somebody. So about a year in, he stabbed somebody up, and he's probably going to spend the rest of his life in prison because the circle of people he had around him pushed him in the wrong direction, whereas the circle of people I had around me pushed me in the right direction. And that truly saved my life. So I spent the next 19 years trying to figure out what I was doing, like where I was going to go, how I was going to spend my time. I did a lot of reading. I was introduced to meditation. I was introduced to an entirely different world than I had ever known. I found a greater sense of purpose and meaning and even happiness in prison than I'd ever felt on the outside. One of the things that I realized was so important was being of service to other people. So I was a mentor in a mental health program. I was a tutor. I worked with other people. I taught people in every area that I could because I had had so much freely given to me, and I wanted to share that with other people. So then in 2019, I submitted a petition for clemency. And at this point, clemency or pardons was something that only happened at the end of a governor's term for political reasons. It was basically a non-issue. Like, it didn't really happen. And so I didn't do it thinking I was going to get out. I did it because I said, you know what, I want to do everything in my power to fight the fact that I'm here, to basically say, hey, I believe I deserve a second chance, or I at least merit consideration. And then that way, if I have to spend the rest of this time in prison, at least I'll know I did everything I could. And that was a really important lesson somebody had instilled in me, that we can't control the results, but we can control the action. So I can do everything in my power, and then I have to let go of the results, and that was what I did. Now, strangely, it got some momentum. Like, people started supporting me. There was a television story that I was a part of where they wanted to highlight the fact that Virginia had abolished parole in 1995 and there were people possibly deserving of consideration. So I was a part of that story, and all of a sudden people are reaching out and people are contacting through my Facebook page that my mom ran for me. Like, all these things were happening, and all of a sudden people are writing letters to the governor. And I started to believe, like, well, this might actually be possible. Like, there might actually be some chance that they're going to let me out of prison early. And it was hard for me to wrap my mind around that because prison was all I had known. I was in prison for more than half of my life. Like, I didn't understand anything on the outside, and I couldn't imagine that I would get out. It just seemed too fantastical. So after all this happened, after all this review, after all this consideration, all this absolutely incredible support, and again, the support was the reason I was able to become that person, and it was the reason I was able to get that chance, or that second chance. So after all this, on August 16th of last year, they called me into the office and told me I was going home. Like, that's it. Just, you're going home. Oh yeah, and an hour and a half later, I walked out the door and saw my mom for the first time in a year and a half because there had been no visits during COVID, and met Courtney, the woman who had originally interviewed me for a story and then had left TV, and now we were in a relationship. Like, my world was shifted and upended so completely, and this is the pardon that got me out of prison. And I want to read the reasons why. So they said, and these are the reasons why. Jesse Lou Crossan was sentenced to serve 138 years of incarceration with 106 years suspended, yielding an active sentence of 32 years. And Jesse Lou Crossan's sentence was unconscionably excessive, and the active sentence is almost twice the length of the high end of the sentencing guidelines. And whereas Jesse Lou Crossan has served nearly 18 years, it was actually 19, half his life, more time than the high end of the sentencing guideline. Whereas Jesse Lou Crossan filed his petition seeking executive clemency, specifically requesting a conditional pardon. Whereas Jesse Lou Crossan was less than a month past his 18th birthday when these offenses occurred. Whereas very little separates a 17-year-old and 11-month-old from an 18-year-old 1-month-old, basically 1 month before or after your 18th birthday, bringing into question the assessment of culpability. Whereas the United States Supreme Court recognizing age as a mitigating factor in Roper versus Simmons, and this factor was not recognized in Jesse Lou Crossan's case. And whereas Jesse Lou Crossan has demonstrated exemplary rehabilitation efforts, participating in numerous institutional programs, maintaining steady employment, earning a bachelor's degree with honors from Ohio University, and serving as a mentor and resource for other offenders. And whereas Jesse Lou Crossan has taken full responsibility for his offenses, stating that he plans to obtain a master's degree in counseling or psychology and eventually seek licensure and employment as a substance use counselor, a field that he now has a passion for due to his own experience. And whereas Jesse Lou Crossan has received encouraging recommendations from a broad coalition of individuals, including 109 letters of support. And whereas Jesse Lee Crossan appears to be a proper subject for clemency. And then these are all the things where I had to submit a home plan, and I had to basically make an argument, and I had to do something to validate what I was doing. But I was released from prison with an hour and a half's notice to go into the world where now, a little over a year out, I've started a nonprofit, I own a home, I've managed to connect with the world in the most meaningful way possible. And again, it was all because of that support. I couldn't have done that alone. I don't think anybody could have done that alone. It was because I had people who loved me and supported me that I was able to get my life together while I was in prison, that I was able to get out of prison, and that I've been able to actually succeed since I've been out. And that's why the focus of my nonprofit is to provide the support and resources to people that they need to succeed, and eventually to provide the support and resources to children of incarcerated people, because they have one of the highest rates of incarceration in the country. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see people committing crimes. I don't want to see people ending up in prison. I don't want to see this cycle of violence, this cycle of ugliness, and a cycle of destructiveness. So I'm spending my life to try to make things better.